This is the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast.
Exclusively on the Herd Out Media Network.
Tell it to me straight up.
Hello, and welcome into the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast, proudly part of the Hail Varsity Network. I am Greg Smith, it's 10K week, and I am freaking out because it's my first 10K ever, friend. Today, I'm joined by Hail Varsity staff writer Steve Mark. Steve, thank you for being on the podcast for the second time. How are you?
I'm doing great, Greg. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's been kind of a whirlwind, kind of like, how long have you been technically now with Hail Varsity?
Oh, so I started the Monday before the Illinois game. So it was, that Saturday, Illinois, whenever that was, August 28th, probably like August 23rd.
So does it feel like it's been like 3 months already worth of stuff that has happened in like the less than a month time that you've been around?
Yeah, everything's been going super, super fast, just like speeding by at 100 miles an hour. This is crazy, but I'm enjoying every second of it.
Yeah, it's a wild thing because it's really hard to explain to people until they kind of see it, and you're kind of laughing because like we tried to like tell you, and I'm like, yeah, it goes by quickly. Like there's just a lot. Like just focus on what you got to focus on, and then kind of go. But like it's still until you actually do it and see it, especially what happens on game day, and it's not bad at all. Like it's just the speed of everything. And trying to do everything that you would want to do is just a challenge during the season. Like it's a really unique job that I think a lot of people, it's tough to get a grasp on for a lot of people either listening to this or like reading the work to see like just how many things go on behind the scenes and how many things go into the things that we put together.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is just, I guess, getting in a routine and knowing and understanding and just watching how you guys go about the beats and everything and just trying to follow your guys' lead. There's a lot of learning going on right now, but I think it's for the best, obviously, and I'll just keep on keeping on and do the best I can with and while learning. So.
Right. Now, one thing, and that's really all you can do, but one thing that I always find interesting, and I'm asking you this now and putting you on the spot, but I'm also going to ask our other two new interns as well about this. Did you have a moment like either at a practice or a press conference or at a game where you were like, oh, I'm here. Like, this is like what I had been working for, because I know that this was a dream of yours to cover college football.
Yeah. So honestly, it's always been the dream of mine, the goal of mine to cover college football. And then honestly, that Monday, the pregame, it started right away with that the pregame press conference where the players went up to the podium and started talking. I think that's when like, oh, I'm like a few feet away from Adrian Martinez, who I've watched on the TV for like 3.5 years or 4 years or whatever it's been. And now I'm like supposed to be like writing a story on him and like maybe asking him questions and stuff. It's like, wow. Things are picking up here. So
yeah, which is fun because you do get like, is it like we were saying, you kind of get thrown into it, but you are doing a good job so far. I didn't want to say that. I've enjoyed your coverage. I like kind of gave you a hard time on Twitter yesterday, said Steve Mark, football guy, on the quote tweet, because I've come to realize about you that you love football. Like that sounds like it's not a cliche. Like that is 100% the truth. You love some football. I did see that you wanted to come down to the field on Saturday pregame and see the Buffalo defensive lineman. That's when I knew that this right here is a football guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something that I grew up with. I played it in high school, not at a high level, but I was still on the team. But yeah, it's just it has a special place in my heart, the game of football and every single thing about it. And you know, I love everything about it. There's some bad things about college football right now these days, but you know, just the product on the field, I'm all about it. Learning about it every day, reading about it, watching about it, I'm all it.
All right. Now, each week we have a couple of segments that are mainstays on the show, as you guys know. The first one is called Coach Speak, where we go over something that a coach, player, or talking head said, and then we give you the straight up breakdown of what they meant.
Coach Speak to Real Talk.
Now, this week comes courtesy of Nebraska coach Scott Frost, who had this to say about the play calling after Saturday's 28-3 win against Buffalo at home. Quote, we need to be able to take more shots downfield, and we did take them today, and we hit them. We have to be able to do more of that. That is going to help back people off, but we also need to be able to run it better to help open those things up. So it is hard to complain about a game against a good team in which you win by 3 scores and have 500 yards on offense or whatever we had, but it did not feel like we had that, and I was not satisfied, so we still have work to do. End quote. Steve, what does that mean?
Well, there are a lot of words there.
There were.
But to me, it just means that he knows that opposing defenses, the game plan for him for the past few seasons are they're not really scared of Adrian Martinez's arm. So it's kind of like a show me what he can do, or else we're just going to pack the box with bodies, stop that run, and make Adrian Martinez's arm beat us. And I think that's the kind of game plan defenses are going with right now. And honestly, I can't blame them. So that's basically what that quote says to me. It's just having the confidence in the play calling, and Adrian having confidence in himself to just open up downfield, test defenses vertically, just blow the top off defenses, at least attempt to, with some downfield passing. And I think they showed that with Samori Touré's pair of 68-yard touchdown passes. And I know Oliver Martin kind of brings that aspect whenever he gets back. But I think they're starting to do that. But until that really changes and defenses kind of get scared of Adrian's arm, they're just going to pack the box and stop the run and see if Adrian can beat him himself.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, and I also think that unfortunately for Nebraska, that is the way that teams are going to play them, and also unfortunately for Nebraska as they move along, especially once they get into Big Ten play, you're going to get better defenses that you're facing on a weekly basis, and I think the kind of added wrinkle of teams that have faced Nebraska now for a few years, so they have a good scout on them, they have a good feel for what they've been doing. So I think if Nebraska can continue to add in those downfield shots, we also had, I guess, the Xavier Betts catch for the touchdown that got called back. And man, that was just such a great play and great concentration by him. So you feel for him for having had that taken off of the board. But that's also kind of been a story of this team of having those untimely penalties as they it feels like they brought the number of overall penalties down a little bit. But when they hit has just been at back-breaking times, which has to be frustrating for them because, I know that they've preached, we've got to be smarter. We've got to do the little things like get less penalties, and they get less penalties, but the timing of them is just so awful, right? That has to just be frustrating. But I think if Nebraska can continue to work in those downfield shots, it will definitely help. But it's also just, I think, a little bit different than how maybe Frost wanted to structure kind of the revival of this offense, right? Like, I think that I really do believe from all of with all of the offseason talk about being able to run downhill and kind of lean on that offensive line that is young and game experience together, but not technically young. I want to make sure I say that up front. Be able to actually lean on them and that stable of running backs. But what they found is, I think because teams are so unafraid of Nebraska's passing game, that it just makes the math of it is just really hard. Even if Nebraska's 5 offensive linemen were going 5-on-5 and doing a really good job with those extra guys in the box, like it's just going to be really difficult. And that's before you get to the fact that in a lot of cases, Nebraska's getting beat up front in those one-on-one matchups too, which makes it even harder. Then you add in some cases with defenses, just putting a spy on Adrian Martinez. Now, Buffalo did not do a great job of that, or at least that first guy that was coming down, Adrian was able to make that guy miss a few times. But if teams got that, if Buffalo had gotten that cleaned up, who knows what Nebraska's offense would have looked like on Saturday. But I do think that getting those explosive plays down the field is going to be the key to opening this thing up, because it just can't be, it looks like right now, I don't know how they're just going to flip the switch and say, okay, the offensive line is just moving people from, snap one in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that we've seen the offensive line. That's kind of like the main issue right now on that offense. Just that left side of the line isn't pretty sometimes. And really against teams with lesser talent and size, you would hope that that offensive line would kind of assert itself and start moving those guys back right away in the game. But as we've seen with Fordham, it took about a quarter and a half for that to start happening. And Buffalo, I don't know if it ever kind of happened with those guys. That offensive line is something to just keep an eye on ahead of Oklahoma week, who obviously the Sooners have some pass rushers themselves. So should be an interesting dynamic for that game.
Yeah, and I think that the chess match between Scott Frost and Oklahoma's defense will be really interesting.
Let's break that down.
I think that one of the big keys for me will just be kind of how many tendencies can Nebraska break to keep OU off balance. And I think that this it plays into what we're saying, because I think that Nebraska's going to have to just go a different way, I think, than they anticipated with coming into this season. I'm just not sure that Nebraska can afford to, as the competition continues to rise, and it's definitely going to be as high this week as it has been. It's going to be any week here forward. Like, I just don't think that they can afford to start as slow and try and basically just pound the run game with little results early in a game and then hope that it turns around later in the way that they have been able to early in the season. Because the problem is on the other side is that you're going to have an offense that's really potent, and they're one mistake away of yours from putting 6 on the board. So I do think this, and I want to make sure to say that as we think about Nebraska taking these shots downfield, and they have taken more of them this season, Samori Toure is having a great start to the season because of some of those big plays. I wonder if the confidence that Nebraska has really elevated in taking those downfield shots. And so with everyone, it's Scott Frost and Matt Lubick calling those types of plays. It's the receivers running those routes confidently and crisply. It's Adrian Martinez trusting that he can throw them. That, to me, I think is a real interesting X factor developing within this offense, because as they start to have more success with that, that's how I think you end up seeing even more of it within the offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember writing this maybe a couple of weeks ago about the whole confidence issue with the offense. It's almost like you're playing basketball and you're having an off night, but if you get a free throw to go down, if you see the ball go through the hoop, you start feeling better about yourself, and who knows, maybe that changes something for later in the game. I think that's exactly right what you were saying with the offense. Calling those plays downfield, Adrian taking those shots like he hasn't in the past. To see those balls get caught, Samori Toure with those pair of 68-yard touchdowns, it just does something for kids. It just helps them get some mustard. Just let's go. We did this. We can do it again. Let's go.
Yeah, and I think that that's honestly part of what the whole I feel like is something that's happening team wide with these last 2 wins. And this is where I kind of want to transition to as we kind of think about our feelings about the team heading into Oklahoma week, is that we came into the Fordham game, especially really saying man, what can we really learn about this team? What can they really gain from this game? It wasn't so much that with Buffalo, though they were, a double-digit favorite. But I think, to me, the answer has been clear, of course, after seeing those 2 games, on what Nebraska has gained from them. And I think it is confidence. I just kept thinking, especially while watching that defense play this weekend, is that defense is as confident under Scott Frost and Eric Chinander as I feel like I've seen them. I feel like the defense right now feels like they can go out there and stop anyone in the country. I really feel like they look like they have that type of confidence right now.
Yes, absolutely. And you bring up a good point about the defense. And so maybe do you think, Greg, that at Oklahoma, if they win the coin toss, Nebraska will defer to the second half and put the defense out there?
I think they should. Yeah. I think that goes into something that, we record this on Monday before we go and talk to Scott Frost. And so one of the things that I'm kind of interested to hear from him today is that, and I know we'll see if it's asked. I won't be in there. You'll be in there. So maybe I'll plant the seed here to see, is there a shift in Frost's mind on what type of program this is right now? We know that when he was hired, it was supposed to be all about the high-flying offense. We were going to have a defense that was opportunistic and, bend but don't break. That's kind of a bad buzz phrase around here, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But the offense was going to lead the way. Fast forward to year 4, and we're in a spot where the defense is clearly leading the way, and the defense is the unit that you want to start that big game with. So to me, it would be a clear decision if they win the toss that they need to defer and let the defense go out there and set the tone. I think the defense would embrace that as well. And I think that they probably do a pretty good job at it too. So I would be curious to know if he's in his, like, how that plays out in Frost's mind about kind of the changing identity of this program right now, because I think you have to embrace it and see if you can ride that wave, because I think that's Nebraska's best chance to have success, especially in some of these bigger games.
Yeah, and when you talk about Oklahoma, look, they weren't perfect against Tulane. Spencer Rattler isn't a perfect quarterback. He kind of makes some bad decisions sometime in the passing game. But with that Oklahoma game, if you put that defense out there and for some reason they get a stop, Oklahoma's forced to punt, don't come out with any points on that first drive with the Sooners, that is such a shot of energy, everything, momentum into the arm that like the Huskers need so badly for that game just to get off on the right foot. If they somehow get the defense out there right away and stop Oklahoma's offense from getting any points on the board, that's just going to set the tone and like get everybody fired up on the sideline. And just like, I think that's just a start that you want to see instead of just maybe an offensive series that doesn't go anywhere to start.
Yeah, and I think that you make a key point there about confidence in one of these big games. If we look back through Nebraska playing these like big time opponents, top 10, top 15 opponents under Scott Frost, there have been some really bad losses in these games. Everybody remembers the what's been happening with the Ohio State series, save for that first year in Columbus. That Michigan game in year 1 comes to mind, and there's some others. And so Nebraska has not been close in some of these big games. Or games against like big time opponents. So if Nebraska can come out and start well, yeah, and it doesn't even, it's funny, I'm not even 100% convinced that it would have to be that Nebraska comes out and starts with a 10-0 lead or something like that at the end of the first quarter. If Nebraska came out of the OU game 0-0 at the end of the first quarter or 3-0 at the end of the first quarter, I think that that's a win based on how they've performed in some of these games in previous years. And I think that the best chance for Nebraska to be able to have that type of start is for them to be able to defer. I also think it's interesting when you start to listen to players, and I feel like it happened again after this game against Buffalo when players were talking about the different energy that they get from deferring and then being able to focus on that last 4 minutes of the first half and that first 4 minutes of the second half. I think that there's something there. I just feel like there's something like just kind of naturally, organically happening with the program and the team with those types of setups that could maybe lend to some success instead of trying to force the square peg round hole of we win the toss, we want the ball, we're going to go down and score. I just think that there's something naturally happening. And to me, and maybe it's just confirmation bias from what I think needs to happen, but the leaning into a defensive program, I think needs to be rapidly accelerated.
Yeah, because the other side of the ball hasn't really happened that well.
Right.
Things haven't really gone that well. But yeah, I mean, we've seen the change in philosophy with like the receiver recruiting, right? Like how big these guys are that they're recruiting now. Instead of the small guys, they're kind of getting the bigger bodies in there. So yeah, maybe we are seeing like another shift in kind of how he goes about running the program on game days, especially with deferring and putting the defense out there if he wins that coin toss.
Now, one thing that I wanted to make sure to ask you too, as we like kind of just think about feelings on the team heading into OU week, so after the Fordham game, during the Fordham game, Nebraska ran some of that spread option, right? And then, of course, that perked up everybody, right? And then Scott Frost was asked about it the following Monday ahead of Buffalo. Oh, he says, I don't know how much of the offense that's going to be a part of going forward, right? Get to Buffalo, they run some more of it. They have some more success with it. Do you think that they should add more of that or continue to have that be closer to a staple in the offense? Or is it something that maybe caught those teams off guard and that's why they had success?
Yeah, so I think that maybe caught them off guard because if they did any research on Samari Toure at all, I don't think they saw a lot of him in the backfield at Montana, right? So I think that that is something that maybe is catching defenses off guard with putting him in the backfield and running some option with him. But look, I mean, I'm sure that they're going to run some of it at Oklahoma with an extension, like another part that they haven't shown against Fordham and Buffalo. So, I mean, I'm excited to see what kind of extra thing they do with those same looks when they motion Samori back there. I'm sure some play action pass is going to come off of that somehow. So, but yeah, I'm excited to see what the game within the game basically is what they kind of say with that stuff.
Yeah, and I definitely think that that's because of the success that those option plays have had. I do think that Oklahoma will be on alert for them.
Yep.
But that's how you start to get that chess match, though, where, okay, and what I was talking about earlier, which is the chess match between Frost and Grinch of whether or not Scott Frost can then run some play action off of that, whether he can run some option passes off of it. Like, there's a lot of different things you can do. You also notice that in the Buffalo game, they ran that a couple of times with running backs actually back there. It can become a really interesting thing because it's the reason why teams like the option so much is because when you execute that well, it's very difficult to stop, especially that spread option version when you have a quarterback that you have to respect in the running game. Like, there's no way to deny that Adrian Martinez at this point is their best runner, right? Mm-hmm. And so because you have to respect him so much in that run game, it becomes really difficult and tricky to defend. So it would be interesting to see if Nebraska gets some more of that going within this game as well. Now, as we get closer to this game and we start to get, we're some days out here from the OU game, it's OU week. Do you feel any differently about this game and Nebraska's, I guess, chances than you did before the season, after Illinois? Like, where are you at with kind of what you think just early on about Nebraska's chances here?
Yeah, so I think if Nebraska fans are listening to us talk about this game right now, I think I feel better about Nebraska's chances about hanging on and not having it be an embarrassing national TV loss than I did like at the beginning of the season. So I watched Oklahoma's game against Tulane. Look, Oklahoma had trouble with the Green Wave, right? Obviously, it was just the first game for everybody. Tulane was displaced, kind of odd circumstances. Look, Spencer Rattler is really good, but he's also made some poor decisions in the passing game. The ball really comes off his hand well, but sometimes it doesn't go to the right guys. I think that's now they did have a very good game against Western Carolina. I think it was, they put up 70 points. But I just feel better about it. I think that Nebraska is a team right now with that defense, the way it's playing. Obviously, it's going to be a bit different than Fordham and Buffalo, but I think that they are capable of hanging around a lot closer than maybe like the national media or everybody kind of thinks at halftime. Now, I don't think they're going to win, but I think that they're going to hang around a lot longer than maybe people think to start at halftime.
Yeah, and I'm really about in the same spot, which is somewhere I did not think I would be, especially after that Illinois game. And the primary reason is the defense. Like, I do think that I am really excited to see Nebraska's defense match up with this Oklahoma offense. We have not seen the one thing, though, that we haven't seen from Nebraska yet so far is see their pass defense tested. Now, we saw Illinois hit some passes, but I feel like that was a function of how well they started to run the football, especially that one drive at the beginning of the third quarter. So I think that was just different. We had not seen Nebraska face obviously a passing attack as good as Oklahoma, but just that style of passing attack we have not seen yet. So it would be better if one of the teams that Nebraska had played before this game was kind of a spread pass team, just so you could see what it looks like. Because we just don't. I would wonder how many snaps have we even seen Nebraska with three cornerbacks on the field. this season. And like, is that going to even be, we talk about that chess match in the game within the game, Lincoln Riley versus Eric Chinander. Eric Chinander wants to put himself on the map. This is the type of game to do it, going against Lincoln Riley's offense. But we haven't, like, are they going to go to 3 cornerbacks? Is JoJo Domann going to stay out there and defend that third receiver for OU? Like, how does that matchup work? And those will be things that, of course, we'll talk about throughout the week. As we have player and coach availability. You guys can keep it locked on hailvarsity.com for all of that. But those sorts of things are going to be fascinating, because as we've seen Cam Taylor-Britt tested a little bit, and he's done pretty well. He had the one this past weekend against Buffalo where he was a little late on trying to jump the route for a pick six. But by and large, he's been fine. On his side, we've seen teams go after Quentin Newsome quite a bit. I expect that to continue against OU. I would expect if Nebraska does put a third corner out there for Oklahoma to try to find matchups in that way as well. Like, there's just a lot there. And that's even before we haven't talked about what we all were talking about before the season with Nebraska, and that's the pass rush, right? As we saw in the Illinois game, started off hot, kind of tapered off here lately, but the rush defense has been very good for Nebraska as well. Like, there's just a lot there when it comes to Nebraska's defense versus OU's offense. And that to me is going to be so fascinating. And I know that a lot of the talk this week is going to be, can Nebraska's offense muster anything? Because in theory, you're going to need 30 points in any given week to be able to beat Oklahoma. But that defense and against Nebraska, or against Oklahoma's offense, to me is the game, because Nebraska's defense, I think, is capable of kind of keeping them in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good one. And for me, I'm going to be kind of keying on Nebraska's offensive line and how it holds up against an Oklahoma defensive front with 2 guys, Isaiah Thomas and Nick Benito. Those guys get after the quarterback. They live in backfields. I mean, from what we've seen so far with Nebraska's offensive line, it's still a work in progress. So I'm kind of just thinking like this could be kind of a rough day for that unit with just looking at Oklahoma, what they have coming back on that defensive front. So that's something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on, is that offensive line against the Oklahoma defensive front, which has really recently kind of gotten better and gotten some good pass rushers in that program.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll have plenty more throughout the week, as I said, on hailvarsity.com, leading up to this historic rivalry game between Nebraska and Oklahoma. But every week we end the show with my favorite segment of the week, called Put Them on Blast, where we basically put someone on blast for something that they did or said.
Put them on blast.
Today, I'm kind of going with a group blast. Okay, this may be the first time I've done this. I'm going to go with struggling blue blood football programs. I got 3 of them that we're going to put on blast based on their result from this weekend. Texas, who lost to Arkansas after, I believe, being a 7-point favorite in that game. Florida State lost to Jacksonville State. Like, what? Again, Jacksonville State beat Florida State. And then USC got blasted by Stanford. Now, winning is hard, as Nebraska, who is also fits in this category right now, even though they won their game this weekend. Winning is hard, as Nebraska has shown. And each of these programs has their own issues, though. It's really interesting to me, because Texas got a real preview of what it's going to be like when they move over to the SEC. It could not have been a worse loss, just perception-wise, for Texas. And I think, really, to me, what it exposed about Texas is that as they make that transition to the SEC, we talked a lot about Nebraska's offensive line and them getting that figured out. Texas has got to figure that out. They have got to figure out the offensive and defensive line. If they're going to hope to compete and be kind of in the middle of the pack in the SEC, they have got to get that figured out, because we're not even talking about the sport that Alabama, Georgia, and LSU are playing. I'm talking about just like the middling teams in the conference, like Arkansas kind of is, right? Florida State, I don't know what's happening down there. Their defense was like, I think Arkansas State, I want to say it was the wide receiver, and I wish I had the quote pulled in front of me. I remember seeing it, kind of researching this, where it was either wide receiver or their head coach that said that they were surprised that Florida State on the game-winning touchdown didn't have a safety over the top. Florida State kept playing the same defensive coverage, and Jacksonville State said, so we kept calling the same play. That's not good. That is not a great sign for your coaching staff. And then with USC, like, it's really been the story of Helton's tenure at USC is that they get a ton of penalties. Like, if we talk about like how many penalties Nebraska gets at times, USC has been as bad or worse at that. And USC also cannot run the ball either. Like, they have no run game whatsoever. But somehow Helton ends up doing just enough to be able to hang around. Like, it's a really weird, like, they'll go on a run here after this game, right? And be kind of in contention for the Pac-12 title because the Pac-12 isn't very good. And so he'll end up hanging on. But USC should not be this bad. Like, there's no reason that they have this level of access to the players that they do. And even, like, it's not even the access to them. They have them. They have these players on a yearly basis going to the NFL and not be better. So for all of those reasons, all three of those struggling blue blood programs, Texas, Florida State, and USC, all of you are getting put on blast. Steve, who are you putting on blast?
Yeah, so let's go. This might be a little bit of an old one. I'm a week behind, but Brian Kelly's execution comment.
Okay.
Like, you can't say that with the TV camera in front of you.
No, you can't.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a simple one, but like I know that quote. He was repeating it from like a former coach who said that.
Yeah, John Mackey made a joke about it. Yeah.
Yeah, but like that, I mean, I don't think Brian Kelly like has ever said like a funny joke in his life. He doesn't look like it, just not that type of guy. So that didn't really come off well.
No, there's a couple of reasons here. One, when John Mackey made that comment, though, the setup for it was totally different. Like, it was not apples to apples. And how Brian Kelly, I feel like, went to that post-game press conference wanting to get that joke off, and he was going to do it no matter what. Come hell or high water, he was getting that joke in no matter what. He probably should have pulled that one back, number one. Number two, you're completely correct that he's just not the guy to make that joke because that's just not him. He's just not like, if Lane Kiffin made that joke, it would be totally different because we've seen Lane actually be funny. Also, the third one, and probably the most important one, Brian Kelly can't make that joke based on his history and what happened with the student dying on his campus on his watch. So there's just a lot of things there. And for the reason where he couldn't have been the guy to make that joke, it just didn't make sense. Like, I just don't understand it. They almost got hated karma and almost lost that game this past weekend. I feel like a lot of people were turning into Peacock because that game was on Peacock to hopefully see them lose. And then they didn't. They ended up pulling that one out, which always reminds me too, and even it relates to what I was talking about with putting those teams on blast, is that anymore, man, parity in college football is just so widespread. Like, outside of really Alabama, like, it feels like everyone else can lose at any given time to anyone. Like, and yeah, maybe in some of these games, like if Alabama had lost to Mercer, then maybe you would be surprised by that. But the level of surprise, I think, has been turned way down on some of these games based off what we've seen over the years developing.
Yeah, that's why I love this sport so much. Just the it's unpredictable sometimes. Like, these little schools can, give them a shot. Who knows what's going to happen. You don't always see that with the NFL, with like kind of the good teams are the good teams, the bad teams are the bad teams. But that's why I love college football. It's just, you never know what you're going to get on a Saturday, and I love that.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. And that is going to do it for us today. Subscribe to the podcast everywhere you can listen to them. Rate us and leave us a 5-star review. If you only leave 4, I am inclined to think you're a hater, and nobody wants that. Make sure that you are checking out the other podcasts on the Hail Varsity Network, the Mind Your Own podcast, the Varsity Club, Nebraska Preps postgame show, and the Hail Varsity radio show. You can also check out the Hail Varsity YouTube page. I'm back on there with the recruiting question video of the week with Aaron, and also our post-practice videos. You can find us on Twitter at Greg Smith HB and at Steve_Marik. It's MARIK. And you can email the show at straightupbreakdown@hailvarsity.com. Steve, thank you so much for being on this week, man.
Thank you, Greg. Let's do it again sometime.
We will. I will catch you guys next week.
A Hurrdat Media Production.